I want to learn with you Daf Samach Beis, and we'll start on Daf Samach Aleph Amid Beis. On the bottom, you'll see two lines up before the bottom of Samach Aleph Amid Beis, Boy Minei Rava Mirav Nachman. And what we'll do is, in Ritz Hashem, if time will allow, we'll finish up this perek. This is just one last piece, so that we can start the new perek, which is called Shnei Seirei Yoma Kippurim. Boy Minei Rava Mirav Nachman Kama Seirim Mishalech. What happens is, under certain circumstances, in a weird set of events, sequence of events, we have more than one Soyer Mishtalech. What's the case? How could you have more than one Soyer Mishtalech? What happened was that the dam of the Soyer Hapnimi, the Soyer Lashem, after he did the Hazos of the dam and the Kodesh Kadoshim, then at that point, Nishpach Adam. So the dam Hasoyer Hapnimi, which he still needs, anticipating down the line a hazah on the Mizbeach Hapnimi, is now gone. It fell on the floor. So now we need another Soyer Lashem to replace this one, because we don't have the dam for the purpose of the hazah that has to come afterwards. So what happens is that you can't just take another Soyer to replace this one. You have to do a hagrola, because you cannot sanctify a Soyer Lashem unless you had a hagrola of two Seirim. So now he has the original hagrola with a Soyer that was designated La Azazel for Shiluach. Now he does a second hagrola, and now he has, as a result of the second hagrola, he has two Seirim that have to be sent off the precipice in Azazel. Now let's say he finishes the Hazos of the Dam HaSoyer out in the Heichal. He needs a third round of Hazos, and again it was Nishpach Adam. So that he did another Hagrola, a third Hagrola, to replace the second Soyer Lashem. And now he has three Seirim Lazazel. So how many should he send Lazazel? Amalei, Rav Nachman says to Rava, V'chi Edro Mishalech, should he send his whole, he's using a hyperbole, should he send his entire flock of sheep Lazazel? The Torah only asked you to send one Soyer. Amalo, so Rava responds to Rav Nachman here on the top of Daf Samach Beis. V'chi Edro Soref. What we're talking about now is that with regard to a Soyer Lashem, after we finish with all the Hazos, then we're going to have to do a streifa, chutz l'shalosh machnos. It's what do you call we have parim anisrafim, seiri anisrafim. So if, let's say, we had to use three different parim in order to achieve the kapara, or three different seirim, we're going to take them all out, chutz l'machne, and we're going to burn all of them. So the same logic, says Rava, should apply in the case of a Soyer Lazazel. And it's very feasible and logical to say that in a case where, in order to achieve the kapara, we needed to set up shlosha seirim, then we should send them all out la azazel, based on the agrola. So if Nachman says, "Mi dami," you're missing a pasuk, and the Mefarshim explained that Rava thought that Rav Nachman was analyzing this logically, and therefore Rava objected. You should make an analogy to the case of Nisrafim, where we have three different parim Nisrafim. But no, Rav Nachman says you missed the point. I wasn't using my logic here. I was using what we call the Gzeres HaKosiv. Hasam lo ksiv oso. With regard to the Sreifa of the Sarah Pnimi, nowhere does the Torah use the word oso. But Hacha here, with regard to the Sarah Mishtalech ksiv, it says in the Pasuk, L'shalech oso la'azazel hamidbara. And the word oso, which is an extra redundant word, is a miut, teaching me also only one of the Seirim should be sent Lazazel. So now the Gemara is going to analyze, well, which one of the three Seirim, in a case where you did three Agrolos, which one are you going to send Lazazel? Itmar. Rav Papi Mishmei de Rav Amar Rishon Mishaleach. The original Sarah Mishaleach, that was the first one. That should be sent. Rav Shimi Mishmei de Rav Amar Achron Mishaleach. We should send the very last one. So the Gemara says, I appreciate Rav Shimi. Why? Because the last Hagrola will determine which Sarah is Lashem and which is Lazazel. And the ultimate kapara is going to come from the Sarah Lashem. So it makes sense that the Sarah Lazazel of the third Hagrola, that's the real one. So Bishlem Rav Shimi, Mishmei de Rav, the Amar Achron Mishalech Kosavar, Hol V'Gamar Boa Kapara. The last of the Hagrolos, when he set up the Sarah Pnimi, that's the one that's going to finally achieve the kapara, and therefore it makes sense that the matching Sayer, meaning the one that's Lazazel, should be the one sent off. Why does he think it's the first Sayer that should be sent Lazazel? And the Gemara answers, Savrullah ki Rabbi Yossi. Rabbi Yossi has a principle that applies in general. In any case, we have two possibilities for the Kiyuv mitzvah. Amar mitzvah barishon. We go back to the first one. Hey Rabbi Yossi, where is this statement of Rabbi Yossi? In what context? Ilema Rabbi Yossi de kupos. We're talking about now shkolim machzis hashekel. This now we have a Mishnah in the third parak of shkolim. Rabbi Yossi Omer shalosh kupos shel shalosh se'in. They have three different kupos in the Azara. Each one of them would have a shear of shalosh se'in, shebahen tormen es halishka. That into these kupos, the kohanim, the gizbarim, would take the shkolim that was collected in one of the various chambers in the Azara and earmark those shkolim to buy korbanos tzibur. Vayakosiv aleim, on these kupos, they wrote three letters on each kupa respectively: Aleph, Beis, Gimel. Vitanya, and Rabbi Yossi says, Lama kosiv aleim Aleph, Beis, Gimel, Leida ezivehem nitrama rishon. On the first kupa, that when it filled up, they took the most from the lishka and they started buying korbanos tzibur. That's Aleph. Lahavi mimenu rishon. We should take the most for korbanos tzibur from that kupa first. Shem mitzvah barishon. We have now a principle that Rabbi Yossi says mitzvah barishon, and therefore in our case we have a number of seirim, all of which were subject to hagrola, and we have three candidates to send out to the Azazel. Mitzvah l'shloach es harishon. So the Gemara says, I don't see any proof from the kupos of korbanos tzibur. Dilma, perhaps Rabbi Yossi said that we should take the first kupa, excuse me, not because of some sort of general rule of mitzvah barishon, but to be inna dischazi kamaisa lo chazi basraisa. At the time that they filled up the first kupa, and that was now filled with coins from which we have sufficient funds to purchase korbanos tzibur, the second kupa was not yet nitrama. In other words, they hadn't yet begun emptying out the second kupa. It's only when they finish with the first kupa, then the second kupa becomes viable, becomes an active candidate for Truvas Alishka. But with regard to the Seirim, what we have is three different Seirim, all of which are Re'uyim at the same time. It's not that the first was Roy and the second and the third were not Roy. You cannot explain it that way, because in the case of the Sawyer, we have three Seirim, each one had a Gorol, and now we have to send out one of them to the Azazel. And all of them are Re'uyim. They all overlap in the same moment in which they're suitable for shiluach. Ella, but rather Rabbi Yossi de Pesach, where we see that Rabbi Yossi maintains this principle of mitzvah barishon with regard to the korban pesach. The snan, or the girsa that we should have, is the sanya we learned in the brisa. If a person was mafresh, he set aside a lamb, lepisco, for his korban pesach v'yovad, and it got lost. He took a second one in its place. Akach nimtza rishon. Now he finds the first keves, so he's makdish both kvasim for korban pesach. Each one is kosher and viable. Harei shneim omdim, they're both ksherim. Which one should he bring as the korban pesach? Chachamim say leizman sheyirtze. Yaakov, flip a coin. You have the prerogative. There's no halachic rule that will govern this case. But Rabbi Yossi Omar, mitzvah barishon, that under normal circumstances, if the two kvasim are of equal quality, then you should choose the original keves that was designated first. The exception to the rule is keves hasheni muvchar mimenu is then yivienu, unless the second keves is of a superior quality. In any event, you see there are two kvasim, they're both ksherim at the same time, you have an overlap in time, and yet, right at that moment of the 14th of Nisan in the afternoon, both kvasim are equally valid candidates for the korban pesach, and yet Rabbi Yossi insists that it was the keves that he was mafresh originally on the first round. That's the one, if all things are equal, that he should bring as the korban pesach. The same thing here by analogy. If you had designated through the hagrola on the first round this particular goat as the Sari Mishtaleach, even though now you have three different Seirim, all of which are valid candidates, nevertheless go back to the first one. So that's the end of this parak. And now we really want to begin the parak for today. That's parak Shishi. And we're going on with the laws of the Shnei Sirei Yoma Kippurim. And this is a very, very famous Mishnah, Mitzvason, Shiu Shneim Shavin. Both goats should be equal. Number one, Bimara. Rashi explains that they should both be the white or black or brown. So that's called Mara, and it's the color of the animal. Bikoma, they should be equal in height. Bidomim, they should both have the same market value. Ubilikichasam ke'echad. Now, likichasam ke'echad has two possible interpretations. One is that there's an owner of these two twin seirim, and with one purchase you buy both from the same seller. However, there's a more expansive definition that allows, even if Ruvain owns one of the seirim and Shimon the other, what they can do is they can pool their sale through a shliach. The shliach will represent both of them, and with one Maisa Kinyan, we buy both seirim, and that's also l'kichasam ke'ech. Now, what happens in a case where we didn't live up to that standard? It's very hard to find two seirim that are so identical. Afal pisha ein shavin ksherim. This requirement of shavin, which we said shavin b'mara, b'koma, b'domim, all this is only lechatchila. But b'diavad, if we were missing any of those shavin, or even if they didn't buy both of them with one kinyan, is kosher. Everything is kosher. Everything is fine b'diavad. So this requirement of shavin or l'kichasam kechad is only lechatchila. If all things are ideal, it's not critical. If one of the two seirim dies, now if one of the seirim died before they did the hagrola, so they weren't sacrificed, they didn't designate which one of the seirim was Hashem, which was Azazel, then nothing really terrible happened. And yikach zug l'sheni, the surviving sa'ir will choose another sa'ir to have a zug, to have a pair, and everything is perfect. We didn't lose anything. However, it becomes complicated in Misha Higriel Mace. If after the Agrola, one of the two Seirim died, is then Yavi Zug Acher. Once there was Agrola, then if we cannot bring those two Seirim because one of them died, we're going to have to start again with a new Agrola, and we're going to Yavi Zug Acher. We're going to have to bring not one more Sa'ir, but two more Seirim, V'yagril Aleim Bitchila. And now he's going to have to start a brand new Hagrola. The old Hagrola is invalid once one of the two Seirim died. So it's an all or nothing proposition. Both Seirim have to be valid or none. And therefore you'll have to start again a new Hagrola. Now here I have a very important note from the Meiri. The Meiri asks the following question. Okay, you did the Hagrola, but now one of the two Seirim died. Why can't he just bring another Sa'ir and add it to this Sa'ir? And now he has two Seirim. V'yamod hasheni l'shemasha omed asar shemes, meaning if the Sar Hames was Lashem, so we'll bring another Sar to replace Lashem. If it was Lazazel, we'll bring a second Sar Lazazel. The reason why it's not enough just to replace one of the Seirim that died is because the sanctification, or shall we say the kvius, and generating the shame of Lashem Lazazel must come through Hagrola. And the only way you can get Hagrola is by starting again. So the Meiri asks, okay, you want a new Hagrola? Why can't he have Hagrola on the extra Sawyer that's now replacing the deceased Sawyer? No. Kevan Sharishon Shmo Olav, since after the first Hagrola, one of the two Seirim has that status. I don't know, let's say, which one it was, the one that Lashem or the one that was Lazazel, but in any event, you cannot have Hagrola when one of them has already got its status. The whole purpose of Hagrola and its significance is when you haven't set up one Sar this way, Lashem, and one that way for Lazazel. So therefore, since he has no other possibility to sanctify and designate the second Sar to replace the first one unless he does Hagrola, and he can't do Hagrola with one Sar that's already been predetermined, so to speak, therefore he has to do a brand new Hagrola. Okay, fine. So now how many Seirim do we have? We have three, correct? We have one from the first Hagrola that survived, and now we have two from the new Hagrola. The Yomar, he should make the following statement: Im shel shem mes. If the Sa'ir that was designated in the first Hagrola Hashem died, then the Kohen Gadol should say Zeh sha'ol olav hagorol Lashem yiskayim taftov. He's doing a new Hagrola. The one that was Lashem died, so now he's going to make a declaration that if the Hagrola determines that this will point that finger at one Sawyer is Lashem, then Yiskayim Tachtov. Then the one that was determined Lashem will replace the deceased Sawyer Lashem. The im shel Azazel mes. If on the other hand, amongst the two Seirim in the first Hagrola, it was the one Lazazel that died, then the Kohen Gadol should declare Zesha Olav Hagorol Lazazel. Now we're doing the Hagrola, and we're going to designate one of the two Seirim through this Hagrola as Lazazel Yiskayim Tachtov. It will replace the Sawyer that died, that was a Sawyer Lazazel. So now we have two Seirim from the second Gorol. We also have one seir that survived from the first Goro. All told, 3 seirim. So what do we do in this case? Hasheni, now again, the Gemara is going to vacillate what that means. We're going to go with, I think, the simpler shot right now. Hasheni means the sheni of the first Hagrola that survived and didn't die is Yira Adshi Istoyev. We cannot do anything with it. It was already designated either this way or that way, but now we've replaced it through the second Hagrola. So what we do is we let it go out in the graze land until it becomes blemished. The balmum, it swallows a nail, and then yimacher, we can sell it on the market, and that's called a pigeon. The yiplu domav linidov, and any incoming funds from the sale of this balmum will be designated for what's called Kates HaMizbeach, which means that in event that the Mizbeach is vacant, there's no karbanos being brought, we will use these funds to buy a karban, and we'll be makriv these nedavos, this olos on the Mizbeach that's panu, that's free. Now, normally we have halacha l'moshe misinai that if a chatos the bailam had a kapara with a different animal, then this chatos has to go lemisa, which means we have to basically starve it to death. But here we're not going to apply that halacha. Why? She'ein chatos tzibur mesa, because the two karbanos, the two seirim, one lazazel, one lashem, are karbanos tzibur, and the rule is, according to the chachamim at least, ein chatos tzibur mesa. There's no such thing as if the kapara was already achieved, and as if one bailam was, was deceased. All those principles don't apply anymore. So with regard to a karban tzibur, we have the rule of yira achi stai v'yipol bomum v'yiplo domav linidom. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, he holds the opinion that even a chatas tzibur, if the tzibur achieved a kapar through a different karban, tamus, and therefore the surviving sa'ir from the first hagrola will have the din of misa. The odam Rabbi Yehuda, nishpach hadam, if you had a sa'ir that was designated Lashem, and before he did the hazos, the dam of that sa'ir Lashem, spilled on the floor, then Yomus Hamishtalech, the other Sa'ir, which is the Sa'ir Hamishtalech, now is going to be starved until it dies. So that's why, according to Rabbi Yehuda, we're going to have to bring 2 Se'irim for a brand new Hagrola. And the flip side is true as well. Meis Hamishtalech, if before the Hazaz Damas Sa'ir, the Sa'ir Mishtalech died, Yishafech Adam. We can't do anything with the dam of the Sa'ir Lashem. We're going to have to start from scratch, and we need a new Hagrol. That's what we have. That's what we have so far.